What if you came home tonight and noticed something was slightly out of place? A cabinet door you closed was open. A chair had moved. Your food was missing. Nothing was stolen. Nothing was broken. So you tell yourself the simplest explanation. I must have forgotten. But what if you didn't? What if someone had quietly entered your home and you never knew they were there? Tonight, I'm sharing three disturbing, true style stories about people who discovered tiny clues that proved someone had been inside their homes. And the worst part? In these stories, the intruders weren't always looking for money. They were looking, watching, and waiting. So before we start, hit that like button if you enjoy realistic psychological horror, and subscribe if you're new here. Now turn down the lights, lock your door, and let's get into the first story. The first clue was so small that I almost laughed at myself for noticing it. A cupboard door. It was open about 2 inches. That's it. There was no broken window, no damaged lock, nothing was missing. Just a cupboard door that I was almost certain I'd closed. My name is Megan, and I was 29 years old when this happened. I lived alone in a small rental house just outside Columbus, Ohio. It was a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place where people knew their neighbors, kids played outside after school, and nothing much ever happened. My next-door neighbor, Linda, was friendly. We'd wave to each other when we came home from work, and sometimes we'd talk over the fence. I worked a normal office job, Monday through Friday. My routine was almost always the same. I'd leave around 8 in the morning, work all day, come home around 6, put my keys in a little bowl beside the front door, change into sweatpants, make dinner, watch TV, then go to bed. It was boring, and I liked it that way. I felt completely safe in my house. That's probably why I ignored the first few signs. One Thursday evening, I got home around 6:20. I dropped my bag on the kitchen counter and started making dinner. That's when I noticed the cupboard. The door was slightly open, maybe 2 inches. I stared at it for a moment. Then I shrugged. I must have left it open. I grabbed a plate, closed the door, and forgot about it. At least, I thought I did. The next morning, I walked into the bathroom and noticed the medicine cabinet was open. Again, just slightly. I stood there looking at it. For a second, I wondered if I was becoming forgetful. Maybe I had opened it the night before and simply forgotten to close it. So I shut it and went to work. That evening, I noticed something else. One of my kitchen chairs had moved. Not much, maybe 6 inches. But it wasn't facing the table anymore. It was facing the hallway. I stood there staring at it. And this time, I felt something different. Not fear. Not yet. Just that strange little feeling in your stomach when something doesn't make sense. I check the front door. Locked. Back door? Locked. Windows? All locked. Nothing was missing, so I gave myself an easy explanation. I was tired. And honestly, that explanation worked. For a while. That night, I went to bed around 11. A few hours later, I woke up thirsty. It was around 2 a.m. The house was completely dark. I walked downstairs toward the kitchen, and then I heard it. Click. I stopped. A few seconds passed. Then, click. It sounded like someone was slowly touching one of the kitchen cabinets. I didn't move. I barely breathed. I stood there listening. Then, nothing. I turned on the kitchen light. Nothing. I checked the living room. Nothing. The bathroom. Nothing. I checked the hallway. Nothing. I even looked under my bed. There was nobody there. I told myself it was probably the house settling. Old houses make strange sounds. Pipes make noises. Wood moves. Cabinet doors can shift. At least, that's what I wanted to believe. The next day, I called Linda. She came over after work. I told her everything: the cupboard, the chair, the strange sound in the middle of the night. She looked around the house and shrugged. Maybe you're just exhausted. I laughed nervously. That's what I thought. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But 3 days later, I found something I couldn't explain. A footprint in the hallway, right outside my bedroom. It was faint, a damp, bare footprint on the floor. I didn't wear shoes inside, neither did Linda. I took a picture and sent it to her. She called me almost immediately. Are you home? Yeah. Get outside. Her voice sounded completely different. I didn't ask why. I grabbed my keys and walked out. The police arrived about 20 minutes later. They searched the house, every room, every closet, the basement, the garage. Nothing. There were no broken windows, no damaged locks, no obvious signs of forced entry. One officer asked me something that made me uncomfortable. Have you given anyone a spare key? I thought about it. No. He told me to stay somewhere else for the night, so I stayed with Linda. 4 days later, the police called me. They had found fingerprints. Not on the outside of my basement window, on the inside edge. Someone had opened that window from inside the house. I asked the officer what that meant. He didn't answer immediately. Then he said something I'll never forget. We think someone may have been inside your house while you were home. I couldn't speak, because suddenly every strange little detail came rushing back. The cupboard, the chair, the bathroom cabinet, the sound at 2 a.m., the footprint. And one thought kept repeating in my head. What if the person wasn't entering while I was at work? What if they were already inside? What if that night, when I heard the cabinet moving, they were only a few feet away from me? I moved out 2 weeks later. The police never identified whoever had been inside, but even now, years later, I don't automatically ignore small things anymore. If I walk into a room and see a door slightly open, I stop, I listen, and I check what's behind it. Because sometimes the smallest clue is the only warning you get. My little sister was 7 years old when this happened, and honestly, if she hadn't noticed something was wrong, I don't know how long it would have taken me to figure it out. At the time, I was 24 and living with her in a small apartment in Denver. Our parents lived several hours away, so it was just the two of us. I worked during the day. My sister went to school. We had a completely normal routine. Our apartment was on the third floor. One entrance, a deadbolt, a chain lock. The windows were high enough that I never worried about anyone climbing through them. I felt safe. My sister felt safe. Until one Tuesday evening. I came home from work and found her favorite stuffed rabbit sitting on the kitchen counter. It was old, gray, one ear was bent. She called it Bunny. I picked it up. Why is Bunny in the kitchen? My sister looked at me from the couch. I didn't put him there. I smiled. Then how did he get here? She shrugged. I assumed she'd forgotten. Kids forget things. I carried Bunny back to her room. The next morning, he was sitting on the stairs. I asked my sister if she'd been playing with him. She said no. I didn't think much of it. Then it happened again. This time, Bunny was sitting on the bathroom floor. My sister started crying. I didn't move him. I crouched beside her. Okay, it's fine. She shook her head. Someone keeps moving him. I tried to laugh. Nobody's getting into the apartment. Then she looked at me and said something that made me stop. Someone's been in my room. I asked her why she thought that. She pointed toward her bed. My blanket keeps getting pulled down. I checked the room. Nothing. I told her maybe she was moving around in her sleep, but deep down, I wasn't convinced. So I installed a small camera in the hallway. That night I checked it before going to bed. Everything looked normal. The next morning, Bunny was sitting at the end of the hallway. I checked the recording. At 3:14 a.m., the hallway was empty. At 3:19, the camera went black. Then the picture came back. Bunny was there. I thought the camera had malfunctioned, so I bought another one. For several nights, nothing happened. Eventually, I started relaxing again. And that's when things got worse. One night around 1:30 a.m., my sister woke me up. She was standing in my doorway, barefoot. Her face was pale. There's someone in my room. I sat up. What? She whispered. I heard breathing. This time, I didn't tell her she was imagining things. I grabbed my phone and called 911. Then I locked the bedroom door. We waited. For several seconds, there was nothing. Then, creak. A floorboard in the hallway. My sister grabbed my arm. Another creak. Someone was walking toward us, slowly. I grabbed the baseball bat beside my bed. Then the footsteps stopped, right outside our bedroom. The door handle moved, slowly, down, then back up. My sister was silently crying. I told her not to make a sound. Then we heard police officers in the hallway. There was shouting, heavy footsteps. Someone suddenly ran toward the back stairwell. The officers chased him and caught him 2 floors below. He was a man who lived in the same building, and that's when we learned what had really been happening. He had somehow gotten access to an old maintenance key. He had been entering our apartment while we were asleep. He wasn't stealing money. He wasn't taking electronics. He was watching us. And Bunny? He had been moving the stuffed rabbit, just to see if we'd notice. That detail still bothers me more than anything else, because he wasn't trying to take something from us. He was testing us, seeing how long it would take before we realized someone else had access to our home. The police told us that if my sister hadn't noticed the strange things, we might never have known. We moved within a month. My sister kept Bunny, but she stopped sleeping with it. One day, I asked her why. She looked at me and said, "Because I don't want someone touching it anymore." I didn't know what to say, because she was right. Someone had taken something that made her feel safe and turned it into a warning. And if you're still listening, hit subscribe, because the third story is the one that still makes me uncomfortable every time I think about it. This story happened to a friend of mine. I'll call him Daniel. At the time, he lived alone in a small house in Oregon. He worked the night shift at a warehouse. He'd leave around 8 p.m. and come home around 6 in the morning. His neighborhood was quiet. His house was small. And for months, nothing unusual happened. Then one morning, Daniel noticed something strange in his bathroom. A blue toothbrush. He didn't own a blue toothbrush. He stood there staring at it. He checked the bathroom cabinet. Nothing else looked different. He thought maybe a friend had accidentally left it there. But then he remembered something. He hadn't had anyone over. He threw the toothbrush away. 3 days later, another blue toothbrush appeared. Same color, same brand. This time he took a picture. Then he called me. I laughed. "Maybe someone's messing with you." He said he thought so too. But from that point on, he started locking everything more carefully. A week later, he noticed his bedroom window was unlocked. That bothered him, because he always locked it. Always. He checked every other window, all locked. Nothing was missing. So once again, he told himself he'd probably forgotten. Then food started disappearing. Small things. Half a sandwich, a few cookies, an unopened bottle of water. At first, he thought he had eaten them and forgotten. Then other little things started changing. A cabinet left open. A bathroom light turned on. A towel moved. Nothing dramatic, nothing obvious, but it kept happening. Eventually, Daniel decided to test it. Before leaving for work one night, he placed a glass of water on the kitchen counter. Then, he put a tiny piece of tape across the refrigerator door. The tape wasn't meant to stop anyone, it was simply a marker. If the tape moved, he'd know someone had opened the refrigerator. Then he went to work. He came home at 6:12 a.m. The first thing he noticed was the refrigerator. The tape was broken. He walked into the kitchen. The glass was empty. Daniel called the police. Officers searched the house. Nothing. No one was there. They suggested installing security cameras, so Daniel did. The following night, he went to work. At 2:43 a.m., one of the cameras detected movement. The kitchen light turned on. A man walked into the frame. He walked straight to the refrigerator, opened it, took out a bottle of water, drank it. Then he stood there, completely still, for almost a minute. Then he slowly turned his head and looked directly at the camera and smiled. Daniel later told me that was the moment he felt physically sick. He was sitting at work, watching a stranger casually walk around his home. He immediately called the police. Officers went to the house, but the man was gone. They searched every room. Then one officer noticed something. The attic access panel wasn't completely closed. They pulled it down. Inside were blankets, food wrappers, empty water bottles, and a small flashlight. Someone had been living in the attic, directly above Daniel's bedroom. Police believed the man had been there for days, possibly weeks. Think about that. Daniel had been sleeping in his bedroom every night, coming home from work, making breakfast, taking showers, watching TV, going to bed. And directly above him, someone was there, listening, watching, waiting. The man eventually disappeared, but several weeks later, police arrested him after finding him inside another nearby property. Daniel moved immediately. He also quit working night shifts. Years later, he told me something I'll never forget. He said, "I thought the scary part would be finding out someone had been inside my house." Then he paused. The scary part was realizing how many times I was inside that house with him. And that's what makes these stories so disturbing. We imagine an intruder as someone who smashes a window, someone who kicks down a door, someone who steals something valuable. But what if they don't? What if they don't take your television? What if they don't touch your money? What if all they do is move one object, drink from one glass, open one door, and leave everything almost exactly where they found it? You might never know. You might explain every little thing away: the cabinet, the chair, the missing food, the strange noise, the unlocked window, until one day you realize you weren't imagining it. Someone really was inside. And the most terrifying question isn't always, how did they get in? It's, how long were they already there? Because once you realize someone can enter your home without stealing anything, your home doesn't feel quite as safe anymore. So tonight, before you go to sleep, check your doors, check your windows, and if something looks slightly out of place, don't immediately assume you forgot. Because sometimes the smallest clue is the only warning you get. If these stories got under your skin, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more true style psychological horror stories. And remember, the most frightening person in your house might be the person you never knew was there.